So today we're making a plaque. This is just a simple plaque, something that they're going to hang on the wall in their house. And we've made this plaque before, so our first order is we load the generic design into our Fusion 360 and we start modifying it. We add the letters, we add the text, we add the overall dimensions of the plaque, round off the corners if we want. We add holes to wherever locations that we need to, however we're going to hang this plaque. And this is where we do the most work. This is where we have to do the entire design, and because once it gets on the table, we can't change it. And if we cut the steel and it's wrong, we don't like it, that means we have to go back to the design and fix it and recut it. And that just takes more time. So we spend a little bit extra time on Fusion. Sometimes we'll do a design 2 or 3 times before it comes out just right, before it comes to something that we really want. And then once that's done, once the design's done and we like it, then it's easy. We send it to manufacturing in Fusion. In the manufacturing, that's when it designs the G code. The computer designs the G code. And the G code is what we use or what we input into the machine, and what the machine uses, to cut whatever design that we drew. So you can see here, it's a lot of work, and you can see I've gone back and forth and changing different things, and that's just the nature of the beast. That's just something that, once I do something, I'll look at it, say, no, that's not right, I don't like it, so I'll go back and change it again, and that's just kind of how it goes. That's something that I'll probably always do when it comes to this Fusion 360, and that's fine. And it's real simple to do. It's real cheap, doesn't cost anything, and we're not wasting any steel while we're doing it, which is really nice. It sure is nice though that we can make the plaque exactly the size that we want and know that once we put it on the cutter, that's exactly the size that it's going to be. It really is a nice program, and we really do enjoy it. So here you can see we've loaded a piece of 16 gauge. This is probably a piece of scrap we had sitting around. Probably cold rolled, just steel, and we've loaded it on the machine to cut out this plaque. The machine torch that we're using is on a Hypertherm 45 XP. We're using the fine cut consumables, and it cuts it at about 250 inches a minute at 45 amps. And you can see a little piece of steel got caught up there, so I just used a magnet to pull it out there. Not a big deal. So yeah, it's cutting at 45 amps, and we do use a torch height control, and the torch height control is set at 128, and that just helps control the height of the torch to make sure that the cutting height remains the same depending on the elevation of the steel. So as the steel gets cut, it can get a little bit hot and it can warp a little bit, or if it's not exactly flat for whatever reason, the torch height control, it adjusts the height of the torch to make sure the distance from the torch to the steel remains the same. And it works pretty good. You can see it here just going to work. There's not a whole lot that we have to do once we hit start, is just kind of watch it and make sure nothing gets in the way. You can see a little piece of steel got caught on the end of the torch there. I just peeled it off, not a big deal. Just let this thing go. Sometimes it's pretty fun to watch. So one thing to note about this is when the computer generates the G code, it also generates a path for the torch to take. And most of the time it does a really good job of generating a path that's going to create the least amount of heat into the material and allow certain sections to cool off before it goes back and finishes those cuts. Now that's something that we can adjust on our own, but most of the time we don't let it do, we don't even mess with it. What the computer generates is good enough. So it's just making the final cuts here on this piece. Cutting out the 2019 on the bottom, finishing up these holes, and then it's cutting the outside, and that's it. That one's done. So here I've put it up on the table, and I'm just cleaning it up a little bit. I'm using a 120 grit flap disc on an angle grinder. And one unique thing about our table is we've designed it to, it has a magnetic clamp built into the table. So we can throw our pieces of steel on there, and with the flip of a lever, it's held down to the table by magnets, and it's really slick. Something that's really helped us out and improved our production. So I'm just knocking down the back, knocking down the dross, because we're putting this over a piece of acrylic. We want it nice and smooth, like really smooth. We don't want any deviations from on the back of it that's going to keep it up off of the acrylic. And the 45 XP with the fine cut consumables does a really good job. There's very little cleanup here. I'm just taking a little bit extra time, like I said, because we're going to be putting it over some acrylic, and I want it nice and flat. That's all. But as you can see, that magnet on the table works really nice. We don't have to use any clamps or anything else. We just throw it on there, flip the lever, boom, we're off to the races. So here it is ready for paint. I've already wiped it down with some acetone and throw it on a piece of cardboard, and I'm simply just gonna put some primer on it. The primer is gonna fill in any low spots, and it'll give a good, nice surface for the paint to adhere to. Once it's dried, I take some 400 grit sandpaper, knock it all down, and hit any high spots, anything that's rough, throw it on a piece of block, and I blow it off, clean it up, and then start painting it. Put the final color on it. So I'm laying out the acrylic. I take the painted piece, put it on the acrylic, and I'm laying it out because I got two pieces. This is just what we had laying around the shop, and I don't want the seam to be in any of the letters. So I'm going to hide the seam on the back of it, so you won't see the seam whatsoever. And I'm just figuring out the dimensions, and here I am. I'm just cutting it on the table saw, or the chop saw, I'm sorry. And I like to scribe the acrylic before I cut it. It just leaves it a little bit chip free, makes it a lot cleaner cut. You can see here I'm just cutting both pieces. This Milwaukee chop saw, with the slide, it works real nice for cutting this acrylic. This is just 1/8 inch white acrylic. It's translucent. We use it in sign boxes. We usually backlight this, but this isn't going to be backlit at all, but it makes a really nice backdrop for this plaque. It makes real nice. Once I got it laid out, get a nice clean piece of cardboard, and I look to make sure that everything's going to lay out on the back, and I know exactly where I want to put it, because this is the time where I'm going to start gluing it down. Before I do that, I got to peel this protective cover off, and you can see this is kind of a bear in this next piece. It gives me a little bit of trouble, but you know, it's no big deal. We ended up getting it. It's nice that it keeps it from getting scratched, especially in our shop. There it is. It's pretty satisfying once you finally get it all off, that's for sure. And once I'm happy with the fitment, where the layout is, and I know exactly where everything's going to go, yep, putting the pieces together, yep, that's exactly where I want it. Set them to the side, and I'm just simply using some standard silicone. This is just clear silicone. I'm dabbing in the areas where I know it's not going to show on the letters, and that's all that I'm going to use it to put this acrylic down. Lay them down, add a little bit of pressure, put a nice piece of 1/4 inch steel on there in a heavy bucket, and just let that sit. As you can see, after 4 hours I came back. And then there's the finished product. Looks pretty nice. Turned out real good. So now I'm just simply drilling a hole in the end of the acrylic and a little bit into the steel, and that's just going to be someplace to capture the nail that we're going to use to hang this up. Real simple. I've enlisted some help here. You can see my little buddy putting this up on the wall, showing off the finished product. There he is. Good job. Looks good. Nice. Thanks for watching, guys.